thing about a black hole is that it's basically really, really heavy in a really small place. So it's got so much gravity that it's able to hold on to things at a distance. You know how our sun has enough gravity to be able to hold on to the 8 planets that it's got and various other things.
Yeah.
A black hole is able to affect and hold on to a whole lot of stars that are all around it. If something is heading towards the black hole, and once it gets to a certain point, the gravitational force of that black hole is strong enough that thing won't be able to escape it. It won't be able to fly past it. It'll just be pulled into the black hole. And so it's a lot of it, the ideas of what happens if you go beyond that point where you can't escape from its gravity. A lot of that, the theories about what happens are theories, because obviously we can't get there and directly test it. But what they think happens is that you get to a point where you can't get away from the gravity, and they call it the event horizon. And once you go over that, essentially everything, every little atom is being squashed together. And so I guess that's what would happen to you if you get too close to a black hole. You'd be pulled in and you'd just be squashed down, and all the matter that makes you up would be condensed to something the size of a pin or smaller.
With some black holes, we see some depictions where they're just a black dot in the sky, and sometimes they're depicted with a glowing disc around them. What is that?
So the reason that they're called a black hole is that they don't emit any light. So the things that we see in the sky, other than the planets, the things that we see that are further out in the sky, we only see stars. And we see the stars because they're producing light. So when they're fusing together the hydrogen that's in their core, they're fusing that together, and that, like a little nuclear explosion happening all the time, that produces light. And so we see that light. Now, with a black hole, because the star has died and the only force that's working is gravity, there's no nuclear explosions happening, it's just squishing down to as small a space as it possibly can. It's not producing any light, so you can't see it. The reason we know that they're there is because we see them, they black out light. So the light behind any stars that are behind them, you won't be able to see them, because there's a big black object in the front of it. Other reason that they know that the black holes are there is that because of its massive gravity, it has a whole lot of stars actually orbiting it. So the black hole that we have in the middle of our galaxy, you can tell it's there because of the gravitational effect it has on all the stars around it. It's basically clumping the stars around it in a big sort of globe type thing, the glowing ring around the black holes. I am not absolutely certain about what that is, but I think that is about the light that is going towards it. It's light that might be glowing behind it, and so the black hole actually blacks out most of the light, and you just see like a halo. Like when there's an eclipse, a solar eclipse, and the moon's shadow goes across the sun, and then you see that halo around the outside. I think that might be the same sort of thing with a black hole.
Good afternoon. My name is Charlie and I'm a Year 11 boy at Christ College. My investigative journalism topic is about the Tākaus across the South Island of New Zealand. While investigating this topic, I've interviewed Luke Kerr from the NZ Tar Foundation Board and Tyrone Southwood, who is a taxidermist and a hunting guide. I was able to see their perspectives and thoughts on the culls. In this topic, I've explored the positives and negatives of the cull and the things that can be improved, and Doc's communication with hunters and the NZ Tar Foundation.
Here's what taxidermist and hunter guide Tyrone Southwood had to say about why taha hunting is special to him.
It's special to me because they're a very unique animal to New Zealand. and worldwide, really, where hunting them takes you, in my opinion, the most beautiful parts of our country. And, they are a high quality game animal to hunt. And why I like hunting them is because of the challenge of them and where they live.
Have you noticed any changes in the behaviour of tahr in the last few years?
Not in the last few years, no. Just to add to that, when tahr really started to get heli hunted and getting hunters to shoot them, the tahr culls have happened for a long time, particularly on the western side, which is where I've done most of my hunting. That definitely changed the habits of tahr. That actually made tahr start running downhill rather than up. That's one thing that tahr learned to do on the west coast, and that really changed their habits and actually created quite a lot of harm to native species of plants.
Here's what Luke here from the NZ Tahr Foundation had to say about Doc's communication about the culls.
Prior to the High Court injunction, communication was pretty poor. That's what led to it, basically. They had the Himalayan Tahr Control Plan, which had a review period and a structure that wasn't adhered to. And obviously a Minister of Conservation came in. They made some changes with very little consultation or communication. But since then, communication has been good and improving.
What is the Foundation's and hunters' perspectives on the ecological impact of tahr?
Quite simply the same as any other introduced game animal species, that at high numbers they'll have an effect, and obviously they do have selected browse. They've been here for 100 years. They're a valued part of the landscape and deserve to stay in a managed sense. There is a middle point. There are hunters who would deny the environmental effect that they have, when they certainly have some, and there are extremists who would argue that they have too much effect.
How significant is tahr hunting to local communities, tourism and the NZ economy?
There are figures on that I don't have at hand, but it's well in the millions of dollars. There was a study done by Professor Jeff Kerr from Lincoln University on the value of tahr to the New Zealand economy, and it sits at around about, from memory, around about $10,000 per bull.
My views are that it's done in coordination with the hunting sector, where they are analysing areas that are of concern, and it's agreed with both DOC and the hunting sector that tahr culls are necessary, and that I do agree with them. It's a required tool to control tahr, particularly aerially.
The main concern is the Himalayan Tahr Control Plan and its population cap of 10,000 tahr, which is far too few tahr, and it was a number that was set over 30 years ago now and has never been revised. And their policy within the national parks, where they target male tahr. That's a big sticking point between ourselves and DOC.
Are there any alternatives to culling that the Foundation supports or proposes to manage tahr populations instead of using a helicopter?
We do have a program of selective ground-based culling that the Tahr Foundation implements in specific locations in Management Unit 6 on the West Coast. We're a big supporter of that approach, where we're targeting females only, not juveniles, half of which are males. And we've met with great success with that. We have had great communication with DOC and their current tahr lead, Tom Brookman, and they're adopting more ground-based approaches in many places, and they're trialling nanny-only culling in many places as well, which does have some reduced efficiency in terms of tahr killed per hour. In these early trials, we don't know for certain, but it's targeting the breeding unit, which is mature females.
Here's Tyrone's thoughts on what the population number of tahr should be.
That's a really difficult question. I think that the tahr need to be at a level of what the environment can sustain without excess damage and the ability to keep regenerating. That will vary depending on the area, so it won't be the same across all their habitat and all their area. I don't really have a number so much. I'm more about the number per hectare or acre, and that needs to be something that's studied. And again, for me, it has to be studied jointly with Department of Conservation and hunters groups so that everyone agrees, and it would help reduce the conflict.
Would the Foundation be sad to see all of the tahr culled in national parks in the Southern Alps?
Oh, it'd be tragic. That's where tahr were released. So tahr were first released in the Hermitage at Mount Cook something like 50 years before it was even a national park. So they've been here for over 100 years now. I think they've earned their right. They're a treasured part of the landscape there, and most people visiting our mountains enjoy seeing tahr in that landscape.
Do you think that tahr culling is humane or inhumane?
Done correctly, if they're adhering to their code of conduct and best principles, no, it's not inhumane. It's far better than attempts at poisoning and things in the past. But helicopter culling, it's only one tool in the toolbox, and tahr respond to sustained pressure from helicopter culling, and they can have perverse outcomes like we've seen in the West Coast, where they just push the population of tahr down into the scrub edge, and instead of having their browse effect spread over 800 metres elevation of tussock country, they're pushed into a 100-metre band within the bush edge and have a more concentrated effect. So, and we have a close down period from November 15th to somewhere early February when there's kids at foot, so that we're not leaving, we or they are not leaving unweaned kids to die of starvation.
I asked Tyrone and Luke if they would like to see any changes in DOC's approach to the cull. They said,
more interaction with hunters groups to bring the hunting sector along with the cull so that the parties are agreeing more with what's happening, because culls are required. I don't think anyone in the hunting sector that knows what's going on in the background, they're aware that culls need to take place, that if it's in more in agreed upon areas and quantities, I just think it's better for everyone involved, less conflict.
Absolutely, particularly in the national parks. I understand that they are constrained by legislation there, but there's room for reinterpretation of that, or the most promising pathway at the moment appears to be through what the Field and Wapiti Foundation are pioneering now, which will be an amendment to the National Parks Act, which allows animals that are part of a herd of special interest to be exempt from those requirements.
how can the public get involved to support the Foundation's initiatives?
So the main thing will be, hopefully next year, there will be a herd of special interest application from the Tahr Foundation that will have a herd management plan drafted internally, and then there'll be a public consultation phase, and that's when we're going to need the public support to say that, hey, we like tahr, we think that the way the Tahr Foundation is going to propose management is a good idea, and convince people to support it.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, today I'm going to show you a profile on my incredible granddad Eddie Cook.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, the following interview is a profile on my incredible granddad Eddie Cook. We shine a light on his journey, stories and friendships. Enjoy.
I was born on the 3rd of June 1940 in a little town called Inch in Aberdeenshire in Scotland. We moved to another little village called Oyne, O-Y-N-E. There was only probably 60 people in it. And I went to a little school there, and then we moved to Inverurie, and I went to Inverurie Academy. Well, I did a 5-year apprenticeship in ornamental plaster work, and we used to do a lot of work, and it was mostly repair work in churches and theatres and all that ornate plaster work for 5 years. I always wanted to go to art school, and my father was a old style, nah, you'll never live on paintings. He says, get yourself a trade. And this guy came round to school one day, he was a careers officer, and said there's a vacancy for an apprentice ornamental plasterer in town. And nobody in the class put their hand up, so I thought, oh God, I didn't even know what it was. But it was good, it led me into sculpture, because he didn't want me to go to art school. Well, I'd been working in Gibraltar for 3.5 years, and I came back and spent a winter in a 20-storey skyscraper building in Aberdeen. Freezed. I was going to say it, but not.
Say it.
And I thought, no, I could never. So I decided to, and I moved down to England, and I met this New Zealand family there who were on a year's working holiday. And he says, oh, you'd do well in New Zealand with your trade. And he says, we're here for a year. We've got us a house in Glenfield in Auckland. He says, there's a flat underneath. It's empty. He says, if you want to go over, here's a key.
How easy was it to immigrate?
At that time, you were on the plane and you filled out a form and says, are you on holiday? Are you coming to stay permanently? And that was it. That's all you needed.
How did you meet your partner, Judine?
It was in a street in Timaru, and I heard his voice saying, hello, sailor. I can show you a good time.
Jiggy jig.
No, we met through a mutual friend, Debbie, who was a sculptor in Timaru, and the rest is history.
Which countries have you lived in or stayed in?
You've had extended stays, haven't you, Eddie? Like Italy.
Yeah, I studied Greek and Roman sculpture in Italy.
Like I'm here.
How did your passion for art begin?
Well, that was our hobbies when we were all at home. There was no TV or anything. We just did drawings and made things out of clay. It was all hands-on artwork. And I can tell you a story about my father in the village we stayed in. He was head of the home guard, and they had a little corrugated iron hut behind the village hall, and they used to train every week. They had one rifle. This was during the war. They had one rifle, the rest had wooden ones, and they used to drill. And they took it very seriously. If the Germans had come over, they would have died laughing. So it was a good weapon.
A funny story Eddie wants to tell.
Jim White with a wheelbarrow of concrete around the pool.
Oh, that was funny. It wasn't, the pool was finished, it was full.
Yeah.
And it built these concrete pillars, and you were filling them with concrete. And he had a ramp up, and he came around with a wheelbarrow of concrete, up the ramp, and went, oh, straight into the swimming pool.
Concrete and all.
To go and listen out in the kitchen, she collapsed into the kitchen. Oh, that was funny.
Now I can add that Eddie did a lot of work for us. He's like a grandfather to the girls. He's very good with Trinity and Brooke, so he's been a fantastic friend. You can add that. Yeah, the girls think he's like another grandfather.
The Colonel wants to speak about Eddie's accomplishments.
Yes, he's been very good. He's done those front walls that you drove across, the cattle stop. Eddie built those and plastered those for us. He's plastered that shed I built out there, and he was there hanging up the roofing on in the snow when we built that.
The Colonel wants to speak about his tea bill.
What stories have I got, Eddie? I have to think. Oh no, it's always been a hard case, isn't it, when we've done the swimming pools? Oh, what's it? It was not Bruce. Who was the guy?
Bruce.
No, Bruce, but the redhead.
Oh, Ross.
Ross. So Eddie had a subcontractor called Ross who worked for him, and he was always rushing around, but he making noises and whatnot. Wasn't he? And Eddie's a great man for cups of tea. He loves cups of tea. So when I did the 2 swimming pools, my tea bill went up quite significantly.
Yeah, you were quite poor then.
Yeah, I was quite poor then. I had to use the bags 3 times.
Thank you for listening to My Incredible Granddad.
Good afternoon to all. I'm George Curry. I was lucky enough to interview Robert Kitchen, a member of Stuff news website. He's been there for 30 years. He's a great photographer and has witnessed some amazing things in New Zealand Parliament history. I dove into some of his really cool stuff and how he became a photographer.
What made you want to become a photographer?
When I was younger, I was really into arts and drawing and things like that. And essentially, after having a bit of a play around with drawing and stuff, I picked up a camera and started to play around with that. It was just a little point and shoot camera that didn't actually work half the time, and it always had problems. And my dad and I were always going back to the camera store to sort the problem about it. And eventually, when I hit school age, that's when I started taking photos for and getting a better camera and playing around with that and learning.
How did you become a professional photographer?
So when I was at school, I was in the 7th form. The art teacher, when I was doing art, the art teacher had obviously got a call from the local newspaper to ask if there was anybody who could do some part-time photography work. And she thought of me. And so that's what I did. It was 2 days a week. It was a Tuesday and a Thursday, and I would drive to Wanganui from Palmerston North, and I would do that every week, and that was how I started. But after that point, I went away to Polytech, Wellington Polytech, and about a year into that course, I'd heard that there was somebody leaving the newspaper, and I went and applied for that job and got it pretty much straight away. And so ever since then, I have been a professional photographer, and it's been 31 years now at the same company.
What age did you start your love for photography?
Basically, when I was about 13. It might have even been a bit earlier when I got my camera, the first cameras and stuff, the little point and shoot cameras. But around about 13 years old is when I started working for a professional photographer after school, just doing some admin type duties and stuff like that. But that's when I really started to love photography. I photographed my friends. I did some, skateboarding pictures for them, and that's really when I sort of started to fall in love with photography and everything about it.
What is your biggest struggle with photography?
Now, I think the biggest struggle with being a photographer, depending on the type of person you are, is going up to people and talking to people who you don't know and asking them for a photo and stuff. They can always say no, but there's always a little bit of rejection there every time that happens, and it doesn't feel good all the time. But I know a lot of photographers who always struggle with this one little thing, which is going up and talking to people. Some people just have the gift of the gab and they can talk to anybody, but not everybody. And I think that's probably one of the biggest struggles that I had, apart from learning all the technical stuff behind the camera. The question is, how did you get your name out into the world that I wanted to be a photographer? I think I kind of fell into doing photography through just a chance encounter at school. And basically from that point on, I had my name was in the paper all the time, and people started recognizing my name and the photos that I took. And there was a lot of people I came across when I was working at the Manawatu Standard in Palmerston North who would say that they know that it was my photo that was taken because they could tell. And so I started getting recognized for the way that I actually took some photos. So people would recognize that it was a photo and that they liked it, and they could guess that it was a photo that I took.
What have been some of your favourite photos that you've taken throughout the years?
There's been a few, and I've taken millions of photos. I'm sure. I'm 100% sure I've taken millions of photos. Some of the favourites have been just general everyday people. You know, they've not been famous. They've not been sort of well known or anything like that. But some of those pictures have always been my favourites because they're just everyday people. I have taken photos of the Queen of England when she was here. There was she came to Parliament and I had to photograph her, and we were photographing her banquet. They had a little banquet for her, and when there was a little story I'll tell you about when I was photographing. She was eating her food, and she obviously got a bit of gristle or something from the food. And I was wondering what she was going to do, whether she was going to spit it out or whatever. But she just picked up a napkin neatly and just popped it into her over her mouth, and then put it down on the table. So yeah, I thought it was funny because it was the Queen of England, and we gave her gristly food. Not me personally, but New Zealand.
At what stage did you learn that taking photos is something you had to practice to become good at?
Photography is all about practice. It's all about taking lots and lots of photos. There's a quote by a famous photographer, something like, "Your first 10,000 pictures will all be crap," basically. But that's just telling you that you just have to keep working at it, keep going. Like anything, it's just like if you were playing the guitar, George, you know, you keep practicing and practicing, and it gets better and better. And you become more at ease with your camera. Your camera becomes a part of you, so you don't have to worry about all the settings and everything like that. You can concentrate on the actual art form and what you're doing. So I am still practicing to this day. Even after 31 years, I'm still learning stuff. So you never, ever end up stopping learning. So yeah, and that's the good thing about it, is like you can do all the things that sort of like an autopilot thing. You go here, you take this photo, and it's very autopilot. But to really push those boundaries, you've got to experiment and fail as well. So the more you fail, the more you learn.
What is your best advice for younger people who want to make a living out of photography?
I've been in the newspaper industry for such a long time that I'm not 100% sure about all the other type of things about making a living outside of newspapers. But I know that there's a lot of people who do wedding photos, artistic photos. They do sort of event photos, and so there's lots of places you can go to make money as a photographer. I'm less worried about making money as long as I've got enough, to live during the week to week. Then I'm happy. But there are options. Some wedding photographers can charge up to $10,000 a wedding, and they only have to do one of those a week, and they'd have a good lot of money at the end of it. But I definitely don't. I'm not in that realm. But for young photographers, it's always just, I guess, just keep pursuing what you want to do. And the more that you pursue the thing that you want to do and that you enjoy doing, the less and less it becomes like a job, and it's fun, and that's where you learn.
Throughout the years, how do you think photography has changed?
Well, when I first started at the newspaper, I was shooting black and white film. There was color film around, so I'm not that old, but the we would shoot black and white film for all the inside pages because the printing press didn't do color inside, but they would have a color front page, and so we were given one roll of film a day to get a front page shot, and everything else had to be sort of black and white, and that was processed in a darkroom. And now, 30 years later, we've gotten all the way to digital cameras that can basically, I can take a picture and then send it immediately to work, and it's up on the website and within 10 minutes. And it's still that's slow, but maybe in the future there will just be everything's just uploaded as soon as you take it. I'm not sure, but there's been a huge going from film, which you had to process, and you'd develop the film, you'd have to process the images, and then you'd have to send them off to to be put into the newspaper, and that was a long process. So you could probably do it within about half an hour when shooting film. You could do a rush job, and but the minimum would have been about half an hour just for the processing alone. And that doesn't take into account if I was out in the field. I would have to drive back with the film, come and develop it, and half an hour after that, you might actually have a picture in the end.
Since more technology has come out for cameras, has that affected your photography career?
Yes. As I said before, I started with film. It was very slow and cumbersome, and now everything's immediate and just so quick. I have shot film again in my own personal time, and it is still very, very slow, but it is a medium where you slow down. You slow down your thinking. You're more reserved with what you take. It's an unusual one. You're more considered about the photo because you don't want to waste it. You've only got 30 frames, of film, whereas I could shoot 10,000 frames on this digital camera that I've got. So you can fire off, a million shots in a row if you want. But when you're shooting film, you've only got 30. And you are very considerate. You say yes or no in your own mind as to whether this is worth a photo or this is not. But for newspapers, when I was shooting film, I would probably shoot about 1 or 2 rolls per job. So I would get the chance to have about 60, 70 photographs per job. Or even less on some of them if they were not the greatest jobs to do. But the technology is just going so fast with digital cameras. Everything's getting very expensive as well. But it has certainly made my life a lot easier in terms of doing work for the press. So we can get the photos back as immediately, and that's what it's all about in this day and age. And that's all your questions there. Thank you, George.
Hi, my name is Oscar Singh from Christ College. I'm a Year 11 student, and my investigative journalism topic was around electric airplanes and how they can change the aviation industry, not in just New Zealand, but around the world. In my investigation, I've also found a lot about electric aircraft and how they're operated. I've also interviewed Hamish Jenkins, a pilot who flies for Air New Zealand.
There's been quite a lot of discussion recently about electric aircraft replacing fuel-based aircraft, and a lot of it has been about how difficult it is to build one and if it is safe to fly one. An article created by Air New Zealand titled Mission Next Gen Aircraft, Air New Zealand announces airport selection, talks about their big steps to making electric aircraft part of their fleet. The following is from the article mentioned and will be voiced over by George Wakeman.
Air New Zealand has today announced that it has selected Wellington and Marlborough airports as the ports of its first all-electric aircraft. Air New Zealand has announced the purchase of its first next-generation aircraft, the all-electric Ala CTOL from Beta Technologies, late last year. The airline will initially operate a cargo-only service in partnership with NZ Post. Wellington Airport will be the home base of the Air New Zealand's first next-generation aircraft, while Marlborough Airport will also establish charging infrastructure to power the aircraft for the return journey.
Moreover, another article titled Explain, Getting Electric Planes Off the Ground, published by Airways magazine, mentions the struggles on creating an electric aircraft. The following is a piece of the article mentioned, voiced over by George Wakeman.
When building an all-electric airplane, the primary challenge is energy density. This amount of energy the battery contains per kilogram. Traditional fuels like aviation gas are exceptionally energy dense, around 43 kgs. By comparison, the best battery technology today are around 0.3 kgs, meaning that they are 40 times heavier for the exact same amount of energy. Thankfully, electric propulsion is much more efficient than internal combustion, which help offset the deficit, but not enough. Electric planes end up being heavier than the internal combustion rivals, while also having the significant range reductions, typically in the range of 80 to 90% less. In addition to heavy batteries, the intense usage they will experience in an airplane application will likely shorten their usable lifespan.
I have also interviewed Hamish Jenkins, a pilot who flies for Air New Zealand, on his views on electric aircraft becoming more mainstream in the future.
I think there's definitely a place for them, and I do wonder about how quickly they'll be able to introduce them, though. Definitely for short roles, or short sectors. That obviously Air New Zealand has invested in that cargo plane that you will have read about, which is going to fly between Wellington and Blenheim. So it's sort of short flights of sort of less than 30 minutes. So no problem with the batteries, lasting for those shorter flights. But I think the problem at the moment is the storage capacity, for the batteries, because they're quite heavy, to get a large payload to go a longer distance. That's sort of the tricky bit at the moment until the technology catches up. So I guess to answer your question, yes, I think there's definitely a place for electric aircraft in the future, but the technology will need to advance before things really start to get a bit of momentum and start to replace the aircraft that are powered by fossil fuels.
When asked about transitioning from fuel-powered aircraft to electric-powered aircraft, this is what he said.
I think it's a wonderful idea. As I said earlier, the problem at the moment is because New Zealand is so far from a lot of our trading partners and a lot of the places that people like to go to on holiday. It's going to be quite some time before we have power sources powerful enough to sustain a flight to those distant destinations. I think, we'll get there, but possibly in the meantime there could be other, hydrogen related, power cells or something like that comes along. Technology may supersede the pure electric motor type of power source that you're asking me about. That's my thought anyway. I don't know a lot about the technology, but from what I've read in the newspaper and some aviation magazines, there's a lot of people investing a lot of money into renewable energy and power sources for the replacement of fossil fuel burning engines.
I also asked Hamish if he would fly an electric powered aircraft himself, and this was his response.
I by the time I, as a pilot, get to fly an aircraft, the certification that an aircraft has to go through with the Civil Aviation Authority, and a lot of them are manufactured offshore in countries overseas, so they would have had to go through rigorous testing overseas as well. So by the time I get to fly the aircraft, I have 100% faith in the testing and the regulations and the engineering, I suppose, and that side of things. So yeah, I don't have any issues with. I would quite happily pilot a plane that had an electric motor with, an electric powered by electric batteries, and I don't see that as a problem really.
Air New Zealand, Beta Technologies, Stratus Aircraft and Electric Air were all not willing to partake in interviews. As the aviation industry changes, we will see if electric aircraft will truly change the way we see how planes are operated, or if it will change nothing. Thank you for listening. I hope this gave you an insight into electric-powered aircraft and how they're changing the aviation industry.
Good afternoon. My name is Yoshinori Matsunami. I'm year 11 at Christ College. My investigation journal project is about rugby. How does a rugby player become a professional player from a high school player? In my interview, I have questioned my dad, Yoshiyuki Matsunami, Yuzuru Katsuta, who played for the Waseda University rugby team, and Shota Emi, who play for a professional team from Japan called Tokyo Suntory Sangorys. Also, their translator is Jack Gore.
Hi, this is my dad. And why did you choose to play rugby?
At first, it was because a friend invited me. A close classmate of mine was playing rugby, and he invited me to join.
What kind of skill did you work on to get better at rugby?
I tried to touch the ball a lot and build my body. To perform well in games, I needed to strengthen my body, otherwise I couldn't keep at the university level.
What was the hardest part of transitioning from high school to university rugby?
The intensity of the games. University matches are way more intense.
How did you deal with injuries and setback?
There were times when I pushed myself too hard, so I should have taken more rest. Even as a university student, I made sure to ice properly and take care of my body daily.
Who has helped you the most on your journey?
Definitely my teammates at every level I played.
Did you have any mentor or coaches who guided you?
Back then, the kind of support wasn't really developed back then, so no, not really.
What advice would you give to a high school player aiming to go professional level?
Definitely don't rush. It's better not to suffer a major injury while you're still young. Your peak will likely come in your late 20s as a pro. So if you wear yourself out physically and mentally before that, it won't really be good.
What habits do you think are important for success?
Involving yourself with rugby every day, even just a little, and keeping a record of that is really good.
What do you look for in younger players?
Mainly if they behave with integrity. Of course, the quality of their play is important, but I also look at whether they're a respectable person off the field.
How can you tell if a younger player has what it takes to become a pro?
Their physical potential. For example, Emi was incredible. Also, whether they can keep putting in the effort is really important.
What kind of training is most helpful for younger players?
Game time, when you have match experience, it's really great to strengthen your training, and also making sure you have proper meals as well. Everything matters. Focusing on just one thing isn't really enough.
What mistake do younger players tend to make when aiming to go professional level?
They definitely push themselves, as I mentioned earlier. They push themselves to play in matches even when it's not safe, or make risky plays that lead to injuries, really.
How do you provide mental support to player during all these changes?
In a long rugby career, 1 or 2 matches or injuries doesn't determine everything. It's better to think about where you'll be in a year or two. So don't get too excited or too down over small things. Just keep going steadily.
How important is the rugby academy for young players?
It's a good experience, but since they're still young, how good or bad they are in high school doesn't really determine anything. Some players improve a lot in university, so success in high school doesn't really determine your future.
Should students go to school while playing rugby?
Yeah, I think so, Rugby isn't everything in life. You need to have a plan for your future as well.
How do you think that path from high school to professional rugby will change?
Well, I guess some kids will definitely start to take opportunities and respond positively, while others may struggle. It really depends on the person, I guess. Just because someone isn't good enough in high school doesn't mean they'll make it. Never make it, I guess. But you don't have to see it as something huge. For example, Emi didn't make the Tokyo team in high school, but now he plays in League One and at the national level. So, yeah, pretty big step ups. Most of the kids who were selected back then didn't get that far. So the judgment of coaches or selectors at that time only reflects that moment. So it doesn't carry a deep meaning, I guess, especially at the high school level. Some players will succeed, but others will struggle. Depends on the individual.
What's the best thing to do to become a professional rugby player?
Definitely to learn to control yourself, I guess. This means you can, I guess, love rugby more and more. And the more you play, the more you'll love it, and also the better you'll get. So also, it's important to develop the habit of reflection, as I mentioned earlier. This includes maybe keeping a notebook and just reflecting after every game.
Hi, this is my father's mates, Mr. Katsura. Why did you choose to play rugby?
When I was little, I went to a festival at the high school where my father was coaching, and I remember the players being kind and the atmosphere being very homey, including the adults. So I wanted to choose a sport like that.
Did you play rugby back in high school?
Yes, I do recall doing that.
What skill did you work on to get better?
Rather than advanced team strategies and tactics, we learnt basic skills such as catching and passing, running, tackling, breaking down, and kicking. So all over.
Did you play in professional?
No, I did not.
How did you handle injuries and setback?
I guess injuries were mainly prevented through strength and conditioning training, care and preparation. When injured, we not only worked to, elevate the pain in the affected area, but also worked on the causes of the injury, aiming to return to the game better than before the injury. We overcame setbacks by refreshing ourselves or with our teammates, switching gears and reaffirming our goals and then never giving up, I guess, yeah.
Who helped you most on your journey?
It was very difficult to choose one person, I guess. At each moment, the people I needed offered me help. If I had to choose one person, I'd have to say myself. When I was in junior high school or high school, my father taught me the importance of self-coaching. I think that by coaching yourself, I was able to move forward without losing my goals or courage.
Did you have a coach or mentor who guided you?
I was able to meet many good coaches, I must say. There were some that I didn't like, but by communicating with them with interest and curiosity, they became coaches who gave me new perspectives and ideas. So now everyone who has contact with me is a coach.
What tips would you give to a high school player who wanted to go professional level?
I guess players wanting to go pro really require good rugby skills, good athleticism, good character, good medical skills, like in terms of fixing injuries in there, and also good career plans. So basically just proving yourself right, I guess.
What habits do you think are important for success?
Well, the habit of working backwards from your goal and continuing to work hard can be really great for that aspect.
What do you look for in younger players?
Rugby skill potential is really important. Athletic ability as well. Having the potential there is cool to see. Character potential, if they're good on field and good off field. Medical potential, as mentioned earlier. And of course, having that career potential, to go down different pathways is important. And even just one of these has the potential to become a top player in the future.
What sign would there be that a player could go professional?
I guess if the player is honest and willing to continue to work hard, that's really important, I guess.
What training do you think helps younger player the most?
Definitely participating in the games and learning constantly.
What mistakes do younger player often make when they go in professional level?
Mistakes made regarding personal life, such as money and alcohol, due to mental control and lack of experience, can really be some major mistakes that lots of young players make.
How do you support players emotionally during this change?
We do teach them the right knowledge and demonstrate the right attitude, and even give them some responsibility and initiative while running alongside them and repeatedly reviewing them, I guess. We support them so that they can learn from their mistakes, not lose confidence, and continues to take on new challenges, thereby achieving small successes.
How important are rugby academies for young players?
It is very important because it gives them the right kind of knowledge, and by having the high levels of academics, it can really help to create that competition, I guess. But of course, academics isn't necessarily everything when it comes to rugby.
Should player focus on school while playing rugby?
Of course, as mentioned earlier, rugby is definitely a sport that is based on human education, and good people academically are good people players, I guess you could say. But yeah.
How do you see the path from high school to professional rugby changing?
I mean, it kind of changes depending on the player, the environment, and the timing, of course. All these factors really do change the way they can get into professional rugby.
What is the best thing to do to become a professional rugby player?
Eat well, study well, train well, dream well, and sleep well. Pretty simple.
Hi, this is one of the professional player from Japan, Mr. Emi. Why did you choose to play rugby?
Started because a friend invited me.
How did you start playing rugby in high school?
I started playing rugby when I was a junior in high school.
What skills did you work on to get better at rugby?
At first, I practiced ball carrying strength, running courses, and speed variations.
Did you play in professional?
Yes, I did.
How did your training change when you become professional?
We did heaps more physical training, more running training, and also worked on defensive techniques.
How did you handle any injuries or setbacks?
I just worked on my rehabilitation while imaging myself on the field, performing well in a match.
Who helped you the most on your journey?
I was helped by Mr. Matsunami, who coached me when I started playing rugby. Coaches Takamoro and Miyazaki when I was in my third year of university, and the physical therapists and medical staff who treated me when I was injured.
Did you have a mentor coach who guided you?
I had a coach in each category. After I became a professional, I started speaking with a mental trainer.
What sign would there be that a player could go professional level?
It is important to, I guess, do the right thing in the right way. Some people find it suitable and others not, so you need to think carefully about it for yourself. However, no matter what kind of training you do, I don't think your performance will improve unless you push your limits.
What habits do you think are important for success?
I think it's important to create a consistent routine to know at least one thing about your physical condition. This will determine whether your condition is good or bad, and it will affect your preparation for training, and it will also help prevent those injuries.
What do you look for in younger players?
Definitely preparation for the practices, understanding of the game of rugby, and the quality of their communication.
How do you know if a player can go pro?
Physical fitness is important, but I also think the ability to prepare for rugby training and matches is key as well.
What training do you think helps younger player the most?
I think it's important to know how to use your body and control it using your own weight.
What mistakes do younger players often make when going professional level?
Yeah, well, linking back with the last one, using your own weight, it's important to know that when you're building your own weight, you're building mainly your body through lifting heavy weights in the gym, which is really important.
How do you support players emotionally during this change?
With so much information available, I just want to help the players think more flexibly, and incorporate the training and skills that suit them best.
How important are rugby academies for young players?
I guess I'd like to convey that this is not all there is to rugby, and that the value of training on academics is really important.
Should players focus on school while playing rugby?
Yeah, definitely. Before being a rugby player, I think as a human, being out in society, and they need to really just have a basic manners and academic ability. So I think they should definitely attend.
How do you see the path from high school to professional rugby changing?
I think that in the professional world, results are way more important. You can lose one opportunity with one mistake, whether you can grab it or not. I think that players who can enjoy the tension can become mainly top players,
What is the best thing to do to become professional rugby player?
I guess it's not really just for professional rugby players in general, but I think it's important to speak out and tell those around you about the person you want to be and your dreams. If you want to become a professional rugby player, I think it's a great idea to start maybe watching a lot of top players' matches and kind of learning from them.
Good afternoon. My name is Richie Hazerdine and I'm a Year 11 student at Christ College. My investigative journal project is about rugby and how it affects your mental health. In my interview, I have questioned Luke Thompson, a Japanese rugby player born and raised in New Zealand, playing his younger years at Belfast Rugby Club, and rugby coach Bear Baxter, who has coached Canterbury Women's, Matatu Women's and Chinese Sevens. We have gathered their thoughts and expertise on rugby and mental health. First, we have Luke Thompson, former Japanese rugby player. So, after losing a game, how does it affect your mindset, I guess?
The hard thing with that is that you probably can go two ways, and it would depend on how you lost or how you played. But generally, personally, I'd get really down and disappointed, and sometimes I'd become a really grumpy person to live with, and stuff like that. But then after sort of a day or two, mentally it was a really big challenge to try and focus on the next week and try and get back into training and stuff like that. So I spent a lot of time trying to look at the game quickly and then move past it. So
Yep. And so say one of your teammates was struggling with their mental health, how would you sort of help them out?
that's a tough question, Richie. First, you sort of have to. Well, it depends on your relationship with them, I suppose. Like if it's someone who's really close with you, then you sort of start just sort of talking to them and just trying to get a gauge on how they feel or what their situation is. And then it's probably really important to have safe people or people that you trust and the other person will trust. Try and look elsewhere to try and find some mental health specialists or providers that will be able to give you some tools or to be able to help in some way. So
and as a player, did you ever struggle with your mental health?
I think I had one period especially that I found really, really tough, or a couple of periods, but one that I remember really clearly was when I first went to Japan. I played 2 years at a team, and they the first year I played really, really well, and the second year didn't get as many opportunities, but was okay. And then sort of 3/4 of the way through the season, the team boss said, "Look, we really like you. We're happy with you. We want you to stay here forever. We want to carry on." And then, a month before the end of the year, when contracts have been drawn up, they turned around and said, "No, sorry, we don't want you anymore." And that was really, really hard. because I was in a foreign country. I was by myself pretty much, and I had nowhere to go. Like, I'd just been told I wasn't wanted, and
That's what Luke had to say about the topic. Now we have Blair Baxter, head coach of Matatu Women's Rugby and Mid Canterbury Rugby, and this is what he has to say. So after losing a game, how does that affect your mental health?
Because I'm super competitive, and I take every loss personally. And probably the same with Whitney, who I coach with. It comes back to how could we have been better? What could have we done during the week to enable performance? All that. So it does impact me quite hard.
Yeah. If one of your players was struggling with their mental health, how would you help them out?
Yeah, we got awesome support around them, but if there's sometimes some individuals connect better with certain coaches or staff, and if an athlete was to come to myself, we're obviously always open and in a position to talk, because mental health is such a vast, it's so broad, I guess, and understanding what is the piece that's impacted, and then how do we support me as a coach or the staff, the wider picture? How do we help them?
As a coach, how do you create a team environment where they can come forward about stuff that they're struggling with?
Yeah, it's something that we talk about often. We provide information and education on services if you are in a space where you're struggling mentally or emotionally. We'd like to think, in our space, it is a really psychologically safe space so the athletes can be their authentic self. And it's talked about often. If you are feeling our way, whatever that might be, here's support, whether it's connecting with a teammate, a senior player, a performance psychologist, general manager, whoever. We'll do everything we can to help. And